The underestimated species. The laughter echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Federation's council chamber, a sound that cut deeper than any weapon. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her weathered hands gripping the edges. As she watched alien representatives from dozens of worlds mock humanity's latest proposal, their translator devices buzzed with amusement, converting her words into sounds of derision across the galaxy. Electromagnetic propulsion, wheezed High Counselor Vash, his 6 eyes blinking in what passed for humor among his kind. The humans want to throw metal rods really, really fast. The chamber erupted again, tentacles slapping against crystalline surfaces, chittering sounds of alien mirth filling the air. Sarah maintained her composure, though inside she burned with frustration. For 3 years, she had served as Earth's chief military liaison to the Federation, watching as humanity was relegated to the role of galactic janitors. They cleaned up space debris, ran supply missions to mining colonies, and provided manual labor for projects too dangerous for civilized species. The Federation's advanced races possessed energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids, shields that bent space-time itself, and faster-than-light travel that made Earth's chemical rockets look like toys. But they had overlooked something crucial about humans. They never knew when to quit. Distinguished counselors, Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the mockery, our proposal represents a significant advancement in kinetic warfare technology. The electromagnetic mass driver system we've developed can barely scratch our hull plating, interrupted Ambassador Crix of the Zephyrian Empire, his scaled features twisted in contempt. Your species lacks the fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics necessary for true warfare. Perhaps you should focus on what you do best, cleaning up after your betters. The chamber fell silent for a moment before another wave of laughter swept through. Sarah looked out at the sea of alien faces, each one convinced of humanity's inferiority. They saw humans as primitive, stuck with outdated technology while they wielded the power of stars themselves. What they didn't see was the fire burning. In Sarah's eyes, the same fire that had driven her species to crawl out of caves and reach for the heavens. Very well, she said quietly, stepping back from the podium. Thank you for your time. As Sarah walked through the station's corridors afterward, her neural implant buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth. Dr. Marcus. Webb's familiar voice filled her head through the secure channel. Sarah, please tell me you didn't actually present the real specifications to those arrogant bastards. She smiled for the first time in hours. Of course not, Marcus. I gave them the prototype data from 6 months ago. They think our rail system can barely manage 30,000 meters per second. Good. Webb's relief was audible. Because I just ran the final calculations on Silent Thunder. We're looking at initial velocities approaching 200,000 meters per second. The penetration mathematics are honestly terrifying. Sarah paused at a viewport, staring out at the blue marble of Earth hanging in the distance. 3 billion humans lived on that world, most of them unaware that they were considered a joke by the rest of the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on her. That humanity's greatest strength had always been their refusal to accept limitations. Project Silent Thunder had begun 2 years earlier in a classified facility buried beneath the Australian outback, while the Federation's species relied on exotic matter and quantum manipulation for their weapons. Humans had taken a different approach. They had looked at the fundamental laws of physics and asked a simple question. What happens when you accelerate a dense object to truly extreme velocities? The answer, as it turned out, was beautiful and terrible. Dr. Webb had assembled a team of Earth's brightest minds, pulling experts from fields ranging from electromagnetic engineering to materials science. They had studied the Federation's technology, not to copy it, but to understand its limitations. Energy weapons, for all their sophistication, could be deflected by properly tuned shields. Quantum disruptors required enormous power sources that limited their firing rate. Even antimatter warheads could be neutralized by emergency protocols. But momentum was different. Momentum was honest. A sufficiently massive object moving at sufficient velocity would penetrate any known defense through sheer kinetic energy. The challenge lay not in the concept, but in the engineering. The rail system they developed stretched for 50 kilometers underground, using Earth's magnetic field itself as part of the acceleration matrix. Superconducting coils guided projectiles along the barrel, while electromagnetic fields accelerated them far beyond anything previously achieved. The projectiles themselves were works of art. Dense tungsten cores, wrapped in depleted uranium, shaped to maintain stability at relativistic velocities. Sarah remembered the first test firing, conducted against an asteroid in the outer system. The projectile had been barely visible as it left the barrel, a streak of metal moving at speeds that bent light around it. When it struck the asteroid, there had been no explosion, no dramatic fireball. The rock had simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the kinetic energy transfer. Even the debris had been scattered at velocities that carried it beyond the solar system. Commander Chen, another voice, interrupted her thoughts. Captain Elena Rodriguez appeared beside her at the viewport, her Earth Defense Force uniform crisp. Despite the long journey from home, orders from command, the Zephyrians are mobilizing a fleet. Sarah's blood chilled. How many ships? 12 heavy cruisers and a battleship. They're calling it a compliance inspection of our defensive capabilities. Elena's expression was grim. They'll be here in 72 hours. The two women stood in silence, watching Earth turn slowly in the void. Both knew what this meant. The Zephyrian Empire had grown tired of humanity's stubborn independence. They would arrive with overwhelming force, demand Earth's submission to their authority, and expect immediate compliance. It was an old story in the galaxy, one that usually ended with entire civilizations reduced to slave status. Elena, Sarah said finally, send a priority message to Dr. Webb. Tell him to begin final preparations for Silent Thunder and patch me through to Earth Defense Command. Within hours, Sarah was aboard a fast courier ship racing toward Earth. The journey gave her time to think, to consider the weight of what they were about to attempt. The Federation had never seen humanity's true capabilities because humans had learned to keep their secrets well. While alien species shared their technological advances freely, competing only in implementation, humans had maintained the ancient tradition of classified research. It was a lesson learned from their own history during Earth's various conflicts. Technological superiority had often determined victory. The side that could field better weapons, better armor, or better tactics usually prevailed. This knowledge had shaped humanity's approach to galactic politics from the beginning. Dr. Webb met her at the spaceport, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by focused intensity. The system is ready, he reported as they traveled toward the facility. We've run every simulation, checked every component. Silent Thunder will fire when you give the word. And the ammunition, 30 projectiles loaded and ready, each one, carries enough kinetic energy to crack a moon if it hits the right spot. He paused, studying her face. Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we fire, There's no taking it back. The galaxy will know what we're capable of. She nodded slowly. That's the point, Marcus. They've underestimated us for too long. Maybe it's time they learned that being human means never backing down from a fight. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Earth's orbital defense platforms were quietly evacuated of non-essential personnel. Deep space monitoring stations tracked the approaching Zephyrian fleet, reporting their positions to the command center buried beneath the Australian desert. Silent thunder hummed with power, its massive electromagnetic coils charged and ready. Asterisk. Sarah stood in the command center, surrounded by displays showing the tactical situation. The Zephyrian fleet had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their ships massive and intimidating. Each heavy cruiser measured over 2 kilometers in length, bristling with energy weapons and protected by shields that could deflect starlight itself. The battleship dwarfed them all, a 5-kilometer monument to Zephyrian military might. Incoming. Transmission, reported the communications officer. Ambassador Crix's scaled face appeared on the main screen, his expression smug with confidence. Humans of Earth, he began, his voice carrying the authority of an empire that had conquered 100 worlds. By order of the Zephyrian High Command, you will immediately surrender all defensive installations and submit to Imperial authority. You have 1 hour to comply. Sarah stepped forward, keying her own transmission. Ambassador Crix, this is Commander. Chen, Earth, respectfully declines your generous offer. The alien's eyes widened in apparent surprise. You dare refuse. You have no warships, no weapons capable of threatening our fleet. Surrender now, and your species will be treated with the mercy befitting their primitive status. I appreciate your concern for our welfare, Sarah replied calmly. However, I believe you may have underestimated human capabilities. We'd be happy to provide a demonstration. Crix's laugh was harsh and grating. Very well, your stubbornness will serve as an example to other lesser species. Prepare to be civilized by force. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Sarah looked around at the faces of her team, seeing fear mixed with determination. These people had worked for years to reach this moment, knowing it might be humanity's last chance to prove themselves worthy of respect. Dr. Webb, she said quietly, bring silent thunder to full power. The facility trembled as massive capacitors discharged their stored energy into the rail system. 50 kilometers away, electromagnetic fields aligned with precision measured in fractions of degrees. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, humanity's most powerful weapon prepared to speak for the first time. On the tactical display, the Zephyrian fleet had begun its approach toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had faced primitive species before, crushed resistance with casual ease. They expected no real opposition from the humans who cleaned their waste and fixed their broken equipment. They were about to learn that being human meant so much more than they had ever imagined. Asterisk the shot that changed everything. Battleship Dominant Will hung in space like a metallic mountain, its hull gleaming with the reflected light of Earth's sun. From the command center buried deep beneath Australia, Sarah watched the massive vessel through higher resolution telescopes, counting weapon ports and shield generators. 5 kilometers of advanced alien technology, protected by energy barriers, that could deflect nuclear weapons like raindrops. Fleet composition confirmed, reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. 12 heavy cruisers in escort formation, battleship holding position at 50,000 kilometers. There, powering up weapons systems. Dr. Webb stood beside Sarah, his hands dancing across holographic displays as he made final adjustments to Silent Thunder. Targeting solution locked, he announced, "We have a clean shot at the battleship's primary reactor housing. If our calculations are correct, the kinetic energy transfer should penetrate their shields and hull plating simultaneously." Sarah felt the weight of 3 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. Every human on Earth depended on the decision she was about to make. If Silent Thunder failed, if the projectile somehow missed or proved insufficient, the Zephyrian fleet would reduce Earth's cities to smoking craters within hours. But if it succeeded, everything would change. "Commander," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the Zephyrian fleet." Ambassador Crix appeared on screen again, but his smugness had been replaced by cold anger. "Your hour has expired, humans. Since you lack the intelligence to surrender peacefully, we will demonstrate the consequences of defying the Zephyrian Empire. Target their largest population centers. Make their deaths visible from orbit." The transmission ended with brutal finality. On the tactical display, energy readings spiked across the alien fleet as weapons charged to full power. Sarah watched 12 heavy cruisers turn their guns toward Earth's surface, preparing to write another chapter in the galaxy's long history of conquest and subjugation. "Dr. Webb," she said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart, "you may fire when ready." The physicist's finger hovered over the firing control for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity. Around them, the command center held its collective breath. 50 kilometers of electromagnetic acceleration rail hummed with barely contained power, waiting to unleash humanity's answer to galactic arrogance. Webb pressed the button. Deep underground, capacitors discharged with a sound like thunder trapped in stone. Electromagnetic fields pulsed in perfect sequence, accelerating a tungsten core projectile from rest to 200,000 meters per second in the space of seconds. The rail system channeled Earth's own magnetic field, using the planet itself. As part of the weapon's mechanism, there was no dramatic flash, no visible beam of energy racing toward the target. The projectile was too small and moving too fast for human eyes to track. It left the barrel silently, a whisper of metal carrying the kinetic energy of a small asteroid dot in the command center. Sarah watched the chronometer count down the seconds. Until impact, light-speed sensors would detect the hit almost instantly, but the projectile itself would take nearly 3 minutes to cross the distance to its target. 3 minutes to discover whether humanity had earned its place among the stars or sealed its doom. 2 minutes to impact, Webb announced, his voice tight with nervous energy. Telemetry shows the projectile is holding course and velocity. No deviation detected. On the tactical display, the Zephyrian fleet continued its leisurely approach. Toward Earth, weapons still charging for the bombardment that would cow humanity into submission. Ambassador Crix probably expected the humans to resume their surrender negotiations any moment, begging for mercy as so many species had before. He was about to learn that humans had never been very good at begging. 1 minute to impact, Webb called out. Projectile is maintaining structural integrity. All systems nominal. Sarah found herself thinking about the path that had led to this moment. Humanity's first contact with the galactic community had been accidental when one of their deep space probes had been captured by a Federation survey ship. The aliens had been amused by human technology, treating them like clever children who had managed to build a particularly interesting toy. That attitude had persisted for decades. Humans were given menial tasks, excluded from important decisions, and generally treated as the galaxy's newest charity case. Other species spoke about them in conferences on uplifting primitive civilizations and integrating lesser technologies. The condescension had been total and infuriating, but it had also been useful. While alien species dismissed human capabilities, those same humans had been learning, studying, and preparing. They had analyzed Federation technology not to worship it, but to understand its weaknesses. They had maintained their own research programs in secret, developing weapons and defenses that no one expected them to possess. 30 seconds to impact, Webb announced. Final course corrections, ... complete. We have lock-on. Sarah keyed her communications console, opening a channel to the Zephyrian fleet. Ambassador Crix's face appeared on screen, his expression bored and contemptuous. Have you come to your senses at last, human? He asked. Are you prepared to surrender before we demonstrate the cost of defiance? Actually, Sarah replied with a slight smile, I wanted to give you one last chance to withdraw your fleet. You have approximately 20 seconds to begin emergency evasive maneuvers. Crix's laughter was harsh and grating. Evasive maneuvers? From what threat? Your chemical rockets? Your primitive kinetic weapons? We have faced down Federation battle fleets. Human. Nothing in your arsenal could possibly. The transmission cut off abruptly as every sensor in the solar system registered the impact. The tungsten projectile struck the dominant will amidships, penetrating the battleship's shields as if they didn't exist. The kinetic energy transfer was instantaneous and catastrophic. 5 kilometers of advanced alien technology, protected by the most sophisticated defenses in the galaxy, simply disintegrated under the hammer blow of accelerated matter. There was no explosion in the traditional sense. The battleship didn't break apart or burn. It ceased to exist, converted from solid matter into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma that painted the surrounding void in brilliant colors. The energy release was visible from Earth's surface, a new star that flared and faded in the span of seconds. The silence in the command center stretched for long moments as everyone stared at the tactical display, where the dominant will had hung in space like an invincible fortress. There was now only empty vacuum and dissipating energy. Signatures. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. It's gone. The whole ship is just ... gone. Dr. Webb checked his readings with shaking hands. Kinetic energy transfer was even higher than predicted, he reported in a voice barely above a whisper. The projectile didn't just penetrate the hull. It transferred enough energy to vaporize the entire vessel instantly. Sarah stared at the display, feeling the weight of what they had just accomplished. With a single shot, humanity had destroyed the most powerful warship in the Zephyrian fleet. They had demonstrated that human weapons could reach out across the void and touch any target with absolute finality. On the screen, the remaining Zephyrian ships had scattered in panic. 12 heavy cruisers that had approached Earth with supreme confidence were now fleeing at maximum velocity, their formation completely broken. Emergency communications flooded the frequency bands as alien commanders tried to understand what had just happened to their flagship. Commander, the communications officer announced, we're receiving surrender requests from 3 of the cruisers. The others are jumping to hyperspace as fast as their engines can cycle. Sarah nodded slowly, still processing the magnitude of their success. Accept the surrender offers. Standard terms. Any ship that attempts to flee will be ... discouraged. She didn't need to specify how that discouragement would be delivered. Silent Thunder was already cycling through its reloading sequence, preparing to fire again if necessary. The remaining cruisers seemed to understand this, as their weapons powered down and they assumed defensive formations around their surrender beacons. Within hours, news of the engagement had spread across the galaxy. The Federation's communication networks buzzed with reports of humanity's impossible victory over the Zephyrian fleet. The destruction of the dominant will had been recorded by sensors throughout the solar system, and the footage was being analyzed by military experts across dozens of worlds. Sarah received the first official response 18 hours after the battle. High Counselor Vash's image appeared on her screen, but his demeanor had changed completely from their last encounter. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something approaching respect. "Commander Chen," he began formally, "the Galactic Federation wishes to extend its congratulations on your successful defense of Earth. Your demonstration of advanced kinetic weaponry has prompted a reassessment of humanity's technological capabilities." "Thank you, Counselor," Sarah replied diplomatically. "We appreciate the Federation's recognition." "I believe," Vash continued carefully, "that there may have been some misunderstanding regarding humanity's potential contributions to galactic security. The Federation would welcome renewed discussions about Earth's role in interstellar affairs." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "We would be happy to discuss such matters. However, I should mention that our defensive capabilities extend well beyond what you witnessed today. Silent Thunder represents only the first generation of human kinetic weapons." The alien's 6 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of deep concern. "Among his species, first generation, Dr. Webb's team has been quite productive," Sarah said pleasantly. "We have several other projects nearing completion. Perhaps we could arrange a more comprehensive demonstration at your convenience." Silence that followed spoke volumes. For the first time in galactic history, a supposedly primitive species had achieved technological superiority in a critical area of warfare. The implications were staggering, not just for military balance, but for the entire structure of Galactic's civilization. Later, as Sarah stood once again at the viewport, watching Earth turn in the void, she reflected on what they had accomplished. Humanity had not sought conflict, but they had prepared for it with typical human thoroughness. When forced to choose between submission and resistance, they had chosen to fight with weapons their enemies couldn't comprehend. Dr. Webb joined her at the observation deck, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of exhausted satisfaction. "The second-generation rail system is ahead of schedule," he reported. "We should have orbital platforms operational within 6 months, and the third generation." Webb's grin was predatory. "Let's just say that if anyone else wants to test human resolve, they'll discover that Silent Thunder was just the opening note in a very long symphony." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, savoring its warmth as she contemplated the future. Humanity had proven that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. They had built their weapons in secret, prepared their defenses in silence, and struck with precision when the moment demanded action. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. They were no longer the janitors of space, the primitive species grateful for scraps from their better's table. They had become something far more dangerous and valuable, equals who had earned their place through strength, ingenuity, and the uniquely human refusal to accept defeat. In the depths of space, the wreckage of the dominant will continue to drift outward, carrying with it a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had spoken with the voice of accelerated matter, and the universe had listened. The age of human civilization in the stars had truly begun. Asterisk.